today, Adrian Evans, and absolutely delighted to welcome Stephen Slattery on our show today. Stephen, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Adrian. Very, very well, thank you. Excited about the Money 2020 show coming up, so looking forward to this conversation as well.
Absolutely. I think we all are. I think the whole industry can't wait for it, actually. So I'm sure you and your team have been very, very busy organising a great event. So thank you.
Great stuff. Yes.
So obviously, on the Payments Leader Show, we're interested in the people that make payments happen and the human element of that. Obviously, we work with leaders who enable the human element to come to fruition whilst achieving the high ambitions that the organizations want from their growth. Now, one of the most accomplished people is Stephen. Stephen and I have known each other a number of years. He's the VP for Global Sales for Money 2020. This is the premium live experience that brings together payments, fintech, financial services ecosystems to create and explore disruptive ways in which consumers and businesses are managing, spending, and borrowing money. He has a significant track record in leading sales transformation initiatives and leading high performance teams in a very human-centric way. As I said, I know what your travel schedule's been like recently, Stephen, so thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and delighted you're on the show today.
Yeah, no, great to be here, Adrian, and looking forward to our discussion today. Let's get on.
Excellent. So from the start, I wonder if you could just share with us where you're coming from, the foundations that have made you who you are as an individual and professional.
Good to start with a nice short question there. And actually, there's I think there's a lot to be said in how this is answered, but actually there's a couple of key things really. In terms of where I'm coming from, actually, it's for where I am today. There are a couple of things that really are core in how I've evolved. One is about, everything I've done has always been about creating success for other people first, which then creates success for me. And actually, the more I've thought about that, the truer it has become. Whether that was as an individual sales contributor early in my career, it was about creating success for clients. And as a manager of people, it's about creating the success for the people that have worked for me. And in every case, when that is achieved, the personal piece comes into place. And having observed kind of good leadership and poor leadership over the years, you see the full remit. There is a direct correlation in good leaders who create success around them and enable the people around them, as opposed to doing things that are self-serving. And unfortunately, we still see some of that today, but it's a strong differentiator. But yeah, certainly that's one of the things that, over time, and the influence of that comes not just from professional experience, but from, life outside of work and pre-work in education, in sports, and recognizing the value of teamwork and all of those good things. So yeah, that is kind of beyond the usual cliche of putting customers first. It's enabling the success and architecting the success of clients and of employees to drive one's personal success.
Brilliant. Yeah, as you say, that's it's not always the case, and that cascade of multiple wins is, I think we mentioned only the other week, was the payments ecosystem is very much about that, and you can't do much in payments on your own, can you?
Exactly, and our industry is the prime example of an ecosystem where you need to have those relationships around you, and you need to have your partners, customers, internal management teams, internal staff. Everyone needs to be working in sync. It's no one's out there on their own, which again is one of the compelling natures of what we do at Money 2020. I think one of the other things for me, and it's kind of an interesting area, I've been privileged in that I've had the opportunity to work internationally for large parts of my career. And I was saying to to a colleague the other day, actually working internationally is a skill set in and of itself.
Yes.
And certainly when you look in the payments industry, it is international by its very definition. And, the work we do it crosses borders, which means you have to be able to interact and work with other time zones, other cultures, other ways of and methods of doing things. And when you work in that environment, you have to be able to, you have to want to embrace that and enjoy the everything that comes with it. But interest is not something that you can read and learn about. You learn by doing. And again, that has always been interesting. It was always an ambition of mine to work internationally from a very young age. And I'm very privileged to have had the opportunity to live and breathe that and learn from successes and failures alike along the way, for sure.
That's a very good point, actually. That's a truly lived experience, and one I certainly can relate to and sort of stumble over first to before we start to get those things right. So I wonder if we could just you could share some of the values that drive you and also help your organization be successful. What are sort of at the core?
Yeah, good question. I think really at the core is similar to my earlier point, because everything is linked, right? Is that customer focus?
Okay.
We have to understand Money 2020, our audience, whether that be our sponsors, our delegates, our speakers, understanding the things that make them successful in this ever-changing landscape that we face is crucial to the success of Money 2020. And within our organization, that has to cascade through every department and every individual, because what you often see with events is events can be great and wonderful because of a location or of things that happen within them. But one of the things that I believe truly differentiates Money 2020 and how we've approached it has been creating experiences and an infrastructure that enables the networking, the knowledge sharing, the empowering of particular cohorts within the ecosystem, and keeping our finger on the pulse of what's changing out there in the world. Because in the 11 years that Money 2020 has been active, being born out of the 2008 financial crisis, really, the world has moved on in the most dramatic way in that period of time. And so far we've evolved with it, but we invest in that. And, it's front of mind, and we take the feedback and we listen to our delegations at our shows, and we strive for ongoing improvement. And that's been really core to how we operate. So that putting our clients and industry first, because at the end of the day, we provide a moment in time which enables and is a catalyst for success. It's the things that happen after our show that are the real outcomes of what are the people that come along and that will be there in 10 days or so's time. That's the story.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's so true that actually so many people look at an event as an event, whereas actually this is a campaign. So it's like a story, isn't it? It's got a before, it's got a middle, and it's got an end, and those outcomes to be driven. No, very good point. Very good point.
Exactly. And actually, just on I suppose on a personal note, it's I think when you get that right, things become more authentic. You mentioned authenticity earlier. And I think when your purpose is about creating success for others, it thereby generates an authenticity in how you operate. In that it's not self-serving. It creates success for oneself or one's company, but it's not driven by that. And that balance, does it happen every minute of every day? No. But the majority of the time, yes. And that's, I think that in fairness is is a nice and good balance, a healthy balance.
Sure. You're responsible for global sales, obviously across the whole of 2020, Money 2020, which is now obviously in the States, in Europe, and obviously within APAC. Operating internationally, as you touched on earlier as well, what role does customer and cultural adaptability play as important in your global sales role?
Yeah, that's a very insightful question, because actually, we have to strike the balance, right, between, we're addressing a Money 2020, a global opportunity, a global situation in terms of how does money work around the world. So it's a global thing, but actually each region that we serve tackles that in an entirely different way, and has different regulatory frameworks, different economic conditions, different types of countries that are participating. So although it's a global scenario, we have to adapt quite regionally in what we do simultaneously, and that creates a lot of creative challenge and opportunity for us to get that balance right. So, with our events, people can come to our show in Vegas in October and then go to our show in Amsterdam and have quite different experiences. They know it's Money 2020, but they'll learn different things because the content structure is different. It's addressing different types of issues that are pertinent to that region.
Right.
And equally, the type of kind of activations that we see at the show may also differ slightly to reflect the regional flavour or the venues that we have in those destinations. But we aim to keep as much of a global umbrella, but keep the regional cultural sensitivities right, and ultimately on point for the things that matter to the businesses in those regions. And actually, we're in the process, or we've just launched our campaign to go back into Asia. So we'll be in Bangkok in April 2024, wow. And the construction of the Bangkok show is going to be fascinating, and already how we work across so many countries and cultures in Asia is different to how we tackle the US LATAM kind of balance in North America, or the European Union states, and how that works in Europe creates a different vibe and output for the Europe show.
Wow, so it seems obviously that's really fascinating that there's a sort of a global scenario, but actually quite distinctive due to the regulatory environments and the needs of each one of those markets. So no, I love that. I've never quite looked at it in that sort of shape. I'm reliably informed that you're a leader who is committed to lead with engagement and empathy. Can you share where that comes from? Because obviously in a sales role and a sales leadership role, you try to drive success for the organization, and obviously I'm sure some pretty ambitious numbers to grow and drive forward. How do you maintain that engagement and empathy?
It's again, I think the skill and style which anybody does the job with evolves over time. And again, for me, the principle of focus on your customer success and focus on your staff success creates your own success is applicable here as well. I invest time in making sure that those things get checked off, if you will, but that enables then a much more empathetic approach. And actually it gives a range of gears by which one style can work during the course of a working week with different regions. This morning I was on calls with Asia very early in the morning, talking to some customers and some internal calls there. And again, it's a slightly different style adjustment to the calls that I've got this afternoon with the team in New York, and actually having that versatility to me has become, and again, that's been a learned thing over time. Do I always get it right? No. But again, it's like that's the joy is kind of striving to. But I think I found generally a style that is collaborative rather than combative has served me well. And it's kind of interesting. I had several years ago, I had feedback from the CEO of a business I was working in, and he told me I was too nice.
Yeah.
And I was really puzzled by that. And I think where it comes from is niceness can often be confused with empathy.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's in functions like in sales, where there's the stereotype of you've got to be a hard driving, whip cracking, kind of hard nosed, and actually that's not a style that I've seen works. And I think in the world today, there is a far greater need for empathetic leadership, for consideration of how staff operate daily, particularly in a more remote working environment, that enables us to enables employees to give their best. And again, that's different to us getting the best out of them. It's enabling them for them to give their best.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and again, look, do I get that right every time? No. But it's an ongoing work in progress that you got to strive to. I don't think you can get it right every time, all the time, and that's okay as long as we're open to it. And we have the guidance in place to keep improving, and because the world keeps changing, and we've had to adapt tremendously over the last 5 years ago. The way we work today is inconceivable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating to hear you say that as well. And I know your style is very collaborative. It's very calm. It's reassuring. And it's interesting for me, obviously, come from a sales background myself, that actually I always think sort of 80 to 85% of sales is actually about managing relationships. And if you're managing relationships with tension and conflict, I think I described it to you the other day when in the payments industry, particularly though, is that somebody today could be your competitor. This very same person tomorrow could be somebody you partner with, and then next week they could be supplying with you, and then and you need the mental dexterity and emotional dexterity to be able to operate like that. And actually, it's interesting for me when you see people who can only take one of those places. It's almost a major weakness in the ecosystem, because you need the dexterity across those. Yeah. What do you think of that?
No, I fully agree. As I said earlier, I think the capacity to have different gears that you can shift into to adapt to your environment is really important. And I've seen some phenomenal leaders that have one gear, and they're phenomenal until they're not. And they can't change gear, and it doesn't work, and that's a real challenge. But within the industry, I was you made me laugh in that I was just reflecting on one of a sponsorship situation where it was a co-sponsorship opportunity at Money 2020, and there was the existing sponsor in the mix was a global universal bank. And there was a fintech who was co-sponsoring, and but the fintech has spent the last probably 10 years going nose to nose competing with the big banks. And in part of the shift of early on in the Money 2020 time zone, there was a period where it was banks versus fintechs.
Yes.
Will fintechs take over the world? And then as we saw this shift into together they will shift the change of the world, we saw this wonderful moment of the ability to change gear, living and breathing, where companies were kind of moving from toe to toe, kind of ready to battle, to kind of shoulder to shoulder, ready to work together to drive joint success. And you know, we've walked that walk with many of our sponsors, and it's a wonderful thing to see, you know.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that, the sort of the movement here. And I think the best I've heard the banks and fintechs actually is a good example is actually they now need to dance together. And actually, so that means sometimes somebody needs, not I'm a very good dancer, by the way, my wife can definitely clarify that, is sometimes somebody needs to lead, somebody needs to follow, but actually we are trying to achieve the same thing in many ways. So it's fascinating to see some real life examples there. Talking about shifting gears, I know we both share a passion for closing and surpassing ultimately the gender opportunity gap. I wonder if you could share your lens on that, please.
Yeah, look, it's one of the most important situations that as an industry we get ahead of.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it's a real privilege at Money 2020 to be part of an organization that supports this, but also, and crucially, takes action. And when you work for a company that takes action on such an important topic as finding gender parity in the industry, it enables you to contribute something meaningfully in a meaningful way. You know, I mean, to give you an example, you know, 5 years ago, Money 2020 launched its Rise Up program, which is it's a year-round program that brings a cohort of ambitious female leaders from the financial services sector together. And at our shows, there are mentoring, there's content, there's networking that explores ways in which we can drive the industry forward and make change. I mean, so far we've had over 350 women come through that program, and at last survey, over 50% of them had experienced promotions on the back of their participation in Rise Up. And having been in many of the sessions that the Rise Up cohort do, it's an absolute thing of amazing intent and passion and focus to make a shift and change, and we're seeing it play out now. And the other area here is, you know, is our speakers. You know, we pride ourselves on bringing a diverse stage of speakers.
Absolutely.
Because actually that brings the right level of opinion, ideas, and representation. I mean, in 2016, for example, we had only 15% of our speakers were female, whereas today, and what people will see in a couple of weeks in Amsterdam, we've got over 45% of our speakers are female. And again, that's an immense forward step. And you know, it's always exciting to see. So yeah, look, it's for me, it's a privilege to be part of a company that invests in this area, which has enabled me certainly as a male leader to participate and advocate and sponsor in an effective way, and play a part in bringing awareness to the industry. You know, pre the pandemic, we struggled to find commercial partners to come and work on these programs, whereas last year, for example, we were absolutely inundated and oversubscribed with companies wanting to find ways to participate. And that, just as a barometer in of itself, is a really, really strong indicator that we're on the right path. There's still a lot of work to do, you know, and again, as a business, we're taking steps to work with some other organizations to build an index that can help measure the progress that's being made. Because I think it's important we again, we don't just say, but we do.
Yes. I couldn't agree more, and you hear some wonderful statements from many people, but actually I love the fact that that's actually been actioned and that Money 2020 has embraced that fully. I only looked yesterday at the speakers list, and it looks like a pretty even split when you just look visually at it. Just going through it, looks like an even split from that sort of perspective. But actually, I think it's so it's taking action, but also it does make a difference in terms of the agenda and literally the caliber of what's talked about in the room. We know that it's a truism that the greater the diversity, the collective level of intelligence actually goes up in the room. And so it's great to see that fully. And again, we're firmly in an ecosystem, as we've mentioned here, that we're trying to make sort of all boats rise, really. So it's fundamental, and I love the action component of that.
Yeah, no, it's great to be part of. And you know, I must say that, you know, Tracy Davies, who's the president of Money 2020, you know, Tracy's really been the catalyst behind this program and remains heavily involved. And it's again, she leads by example, and I think that's certainly one of the traits that I'm certainly myself try and replicate is leading by example. You know, it's ensuring your focus is on the right things and really leading, going all in and leading by example. So it's again, as I say, a privilege to be in a company that actually takes action.
That is walking the talk. Wonderful, wonderful. What if we could just look at who's been most influential in you becoming the authentic leader that you are today? Because one of the things I've always admired about you is like you show up always as you. Yeah. You don't, whether that's speaking informally, like when we last got together, or on a telephone conversation, or even if you want to speak on stage, you always show up authentically as you. Who's most influenced that for you?
It's there was some food for thought on this, because it's you know, because actually, you know, influence comes in so many forms, and actually really I think the key influences for me come in three buckets really. There's the kind of friends and family bucket, and again, look, I'm very fortunate, you know, I've got a wonderful home life, and that's you know, that's where things start, right? That's,
of course.
That's the starting point. And you know, so the family piece is important. You know, for me, finding balance between family, work, and self-management is an important, I suppose, for me, are my kind of three pillars that for me give my balance. So having the influence that comes from each of those areas is almost of equal importance. So the family piece. The second is the professional piece. You know, and again, there are people from, you know, from across my career. It's again, I get privileged to have, you know, 25-year career so far. That is, I've got to work with lots of amazing people. But interestingly, on balance, you know, I think I've learned more from some of the tougher, harder moments, some of the mistakes and disasters, as I have from the good things and the amazing wins and successes that are there. You know, but again, I think I've had lots of good leaders I've learned from, but actually I've also had lots of great staff members. You know, people that have been in my reporting line, and I love learning from people that I mean, particularly as I get older, you know, valuing the inputs through a, you know, a graduate's perspective, for example, with the recognition that, you know, my reflection of my experience back then is now, you know, entirely different. So operating with an open mind. So the influence comes from every angle. And I suppose finally, it's the and this may sound, it's not meant to sound arrogant, I'll explain, but actually learning from myself.
Yep.
So by that I mean I'm naturally a scenario planner.
Right. Okay.
And actually I'm also a scenario reflector. So I think it's important to figure out, to learn from things you've done and how you've done them, and to anticipate how you do them in the future.
Yeah.
You know, and again, that can be my superpower, but it can also be my weakness as well at times.
Okay.
To be too reflexive. But that being said, you know, I've learned a lot from those reflections to guide what I'll do in the future. And again, it's part of that mix of where does influence come from? It comes from the self-reflection, but also from those around me professionally and the family end.
Wonderful. Just out of that piece there on that self-reflection piece, do you have a formula, or do you have a framework that you work around to reflect on scenarios and things like that?
Not per se, more one of just taking the time to consider.
Right. Okay.
Simply what worked, what didn't.
Taking the time out. I'm with you.
Why did that happen? And actually, it's through in the spirit of kind of the self-care. I typically do that in my like exercise time, which is, you know, a time to reflect as much, whether it's kind of running, cycling, swimming. You know, that's the time to kind of just to check in on things that have been done, to make sure was that good, was it not good, could it have been better, you know, and why did someone react in that way? Was that, you know, can I see it from their perspective? Sure. Actually, in doing that, the biggest outcome I've had from doing that has really helped, I guess, my strategic thinking and my capacity to think about, to apply different perspectives to the same scenario, and to work with others to help them see the different perspectives. You know, in the what we often find is everyone gets very focused on what they have to do, very task orientated. So from a leadership perspective, it's helping people step away from that task orientation to see from the customer's perspective, or from your colleague's perspective who's in a different team, to then find the right path towards doing it, which I guess links to the empathetic leadership style. That piece definitely is a connectivity.
No, I really like that, how almost the reflective piece enhances perspective, which almost by definition then raises your level of empathy for that. But also, I think that it's actually deciding to take some time out and lift out of task is I think hugely powerful. So Stephen, what do you know now? You sort of reflected just now about sort of how you learned quite often from graduates or people coming into the with their new perspectives. What do you know now that you'd sort of have a conversation with your younger self and say, actually, do you know what, this would be really useful if you were to take this into your career over the next couple of decades?
You know, I would love to go back in time and have a word with myself.
I think we all would.
Certainly as a young professional. You know, I think the simplest way to put it would just be to reassure. You know, it's going to be okay.
Nice.
That would, again, I think I spent so much of my career, and you wonder whether this actually fuels motivation or success or ambition. You know, I think probably most people do. You know, you balance imposter syndrome. You balance. Am I good enough? Should I be here? And you know, those things, you know, are you know, they're important emotions to go through. But I'd love to have had somebody to go, you know, look, it's going to be okay. You can lean into that, but it will be okay. Trust yourself. And you know, as a recent reflection, you know, I realized how many situations I've had where I've known what to do, or I knew what the outcome was going to be, but I didn't speak up as much, or assumed other people would see the same thing and they didn't. I wasn't proactive enough, and actually that comes from a place of, you know, it's just that the confidence of doing that. And again, it's finding the balance between being confident but not overconfident, and striking that, which is an ongoing thing to manage. And as I say, I'm always conscious of not being, particularly when you represent a department like a sales department, where the perception of salespeople sometimes isn't great, sometimes it's wonderful, but sometimes it's not. And actually just trying to make sure that is balanced.
Brilliant, wonderful. So I can so relate to that one on many fronts, because I think just almost knowing it's going to be okay, and just lean in a bit more, as you say. I think, and just say you never want to tip that point where you're sort of so full of confidence that it becomes arrogance, but actually just knowing there's a path there that you can take to back yourself and trust yourself. I love that one.
Yeah.
So Stephen, this is normally the part where I sort of try and summarize and just sort of get 2 or 3 sort of really good snippets, but I'm staring at sort of 2-3 pages of notes here. So I wonder if I could just summarize some of the things that my biggest takeaways. I think right at the sort of, I think you sort of shared with us really that actually you believe creating success for others first actually eventually will create success for yourself. And whether that's, that's come from a strong team ethic, but also being customer centric and starting, but also then looking after your people first, I think is something that sort of runs through your DNA and is very, very strong. As you mentioned something really important there as well about international, doing business internationally. It's almost a skill set in its own right, and it's not one you can learn from a book. It's the only place you can take it from really is learning by doing. But going back to that piece for me, customer first, second, third, as you say at the moment with Money 2020, if it's speakers, sponsors, delegates, audience, what are their needs? And those needs might be different, common problems across the globe, but in different scenarios. I think the other piece for me that really came out that I thought was really important was just about knowing the impact you make with different people at different points, and knowing and having a multiple amount of gears, and saying, actually, do you know what, I need different scenarios to be successful here in different places. But your very nature and the basis of what has enabled you to become the leader you are today has been about collaboration. And I think it's great you're in the right industry, because there's one word that sums up the payments industry is about being collaborative. But it's and also like that you said it's a learned skill set and it's an ongoing process. There's never a line you reach and say, oh, I've got that badge now, and it's something you need to constantly work on. Interesting reflection on the industry about actually where previously sort of fintechs and banks or large organizations might have been head to head. Now there might be a bit more of a dance, and realizing they're going to need to go a bit more shoulder to shoulder with how they're doing things. Really appreciate what you said as well. And my takeaway was we hear lots of good talk about gender opportunity and gender pay gap and these sort of things, but delighted you're part of an organization actually takes action and gets results. The big thing that stood out for me is as a result of Rise Up, many people, many women then getting promoted because they've had the right sponsorship, because they've had the right access to, and often that can be about belief and methodology, which I've experienced myself. Or coached people to do.
And interesting, I was listening to one of your other episodes with your guest from FIS, who said that women are often overcoached and under-sponsored.
Yeah, Sylvia,
and Sylvia, of course, and actually, that's something that through the Rise Up program we're looking to address exactly that point,
Absolutely.
and it's an ongoing work in progress.
And it's interesting. I had another interview only this week with Keith Douglas, from CEO of Vocalink, and he said, I asked him about sponsorship, and he said sponsorship's invaluable to get you to where you need to get to. He said, but the first thing you've got to do, you've got to ask. You've got to ask, and also he said you've got to know whom you are, what you want, and why it's in everybody's interest to do so. So I think that needs to be publicized more. I love the fact that you sort of broke that down in terms of major influences that have been from solid family and friends. I think that's the very basis of any success, and then that work balance. But I love how you use reflective practice there to actually take a step out of doing the task, some dedicated time, but actually it almost gives this this wheel where you can see things from other people's perspectives, which reinforces your natural empathetic style as a leader. And also that finally for me then about what would you say to your younger self? I can so relate to this. What is actually just reassure yourself it's going to be all right. So lean into it, but most of all, trust yourself. And actually, if there's those scenarios where you're thinking, I'm expecting somebody else to step up or see this lens. Actually, no, I'm going to need to do that. I'm going to need to raise that. So trust in yourself is like one of the big messages that's come across. So thank you so much. So would you like to add anything at all?
I think wonderfully summarized, Adrian. Thank you, and appreciate the time, and looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days' time in Amsterdam at Money 2020.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much indeed for your time, and I look forward to seeing you also in Amsterdam soon. Take care.
Cheers.